All right, today on the Burst Mode podcast, we're going to be talking about all of the cameras that we've owned in the past, and of course, we'll be addressing the new and quite controversial Nikon Mirrorless system. Stay tuned. I am one of your hosts, Eric Marks, and my co-host, Mr. Joseph Floyd this morning. How you doing, Joseph?
Doing good.
Good. So we figured for the first episode, we'll do just a little bit of an intro about ourselves, just introduce ourselves to you guys, talk about our current camera situation and the stuff we like in photography. Then we'll move on to talk about this new Nikon Mirrorless full-frame camera that has the industry talking right now about. It's everywhere. Every YouTube channel, every blog. Every time I wake up, there's a new blog that's gotten a new
teaser video.
New leaked images, and Nikon releases like a 60-second clip of some guy in like Indonesia playing with it, and they just show you like a silhouette of it. Yeah, it's a big teaser camera, so I hope it's gonna stand up to all the hype. Okay, so let's go and get into the intros. I'll let you take it away from here.
So I'm Joseph, and I'm currently a social media coordinator at a large church here in Georgia, and I got into photography, I'd say maybe when I was around 16 or 17. My dad gave me his film Nikon camera that he had from, I think it was the Air Force a long time ago, and he taught me how to load film into it, taught me how to use the exposure dials and everything like that, and how to use the little, it's like this little, the exposure exposure meter is like this little thing that would go back and forth, and I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but I just knew it was like a little game to try and get that thing in the middle. And then eventually, when digital came around, I had a digital Sony 2002, 2001, I think, or something like that. It was like a 1.8 megapixel, I think, or 2 megapixel at the most, and it was fantastic. And then I took a break from photography for a little while, and then it was about maybe a little bit after college, I think right after I got married, I started to get into it, and then it got kicked into overdrive when we started working together at Peach Mac, and you're like, dude, I like photography too. I'm like, me too. Let's be friends. We'll be best friends.
It's like a tale as old as time, man.
It is. And so that's when I really started buying some more camera gear. So my first interchangeable lens was the NEX 5R, which you remember.
Yeah, and for some reason, I don't remember what the specs were on that, but every image you took was so sharp.
It was a great camera.
Yeah.
It was so cool, and it had no viewfinder, which was okay, because it had a touchscreen. It wasn't the best touchscreen in the world, but it was still good. It was so thin, and it was silver, and I just loved that. And yeah, some of my sharpest images were from that camera. I don't know what it was. I mean, they used the same sensor on like every NEX camera they had, pretty much all 45 that they had.
Clue. And it was even in that crappy lighting in the back inventory room where you just pointed at somebody and you'd zoom in like 400%. It'd be tack sharp.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So I had that for a little while, but I couldn't afford the lenses because the E-mount lenses were just so expensive. I mean, the 51.8 was like $400 or $500, and because they were fairly new, so I couldn't. There weren't a lot of used ones at the time. So, and we were working retail, and so
that was for the APS-C lenses too. They were that pricey. Yeah, right. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, they were super pricey. So then I moved to an ultra zoom. I think I had like a Sony HX100V, which was pretty cool. It had pretty insane video on it. And then I moved to like another ultra zoom, some Canon that was crappy. It was like a HS50XS or something like that. It was horrible. It was crappy. I absolutely hated it. Even though it had high reviews, I still liked my Sony more. I was a Sony guy for a while. And then I went to, I think at one point, I don't know the exact order, I had a Nikon D3300, and that was pretty cool. I actually really liked that a lot. And then I had I'm sure I'm going to be missing a camera here. Oh, I had the A37.
I remember that. That was the DSLT, right?
Yeah, that was the DSLT.
I remember that one.
What was great about that was you could use all old Minolta lenses.
Right.
Because they all fit on Sony. And so I bought a 51.7 Minolta for like $70.
I remember that one.
That's when I learned what chromatic aberrations were.
Yeah.
Because that thing was not sharp, but it had a really, really great look to it.
Yeah.
But it was, insane chromatic aberrations. But I really liked it, though. I really liked that camera. Eventually, then, when I got the job at the church and you were gone working, doing another job, we were both away from Peach Mac, I eventually got a Sony a6000 that the church bought me, and then I was on that for a while. And then eventually I moved to, I think right after that was the D800 that I got last Christmas. I had saved up money, and my parents were going to put in a little bit of money and get me a camera. It was either going to be the Fuji X-T20 with a 35 f2, and I mean, I was about 5 minutes away from getting that.
I remember that.
And then you texted me, and you're like, dude, this is an awesome D800. And it was a crazy deal. And my dad had shot Nikon for a long time, so he was real partial to Nikon. And he had some old Nikon lenses, which turned out I couldn't use a lot of them because I didn't know most of them were DX lenses. And some of them were just, it was such an old or obscure mount that it didn't actually fit on there, which is weird. But so I got that, and I used that for about a year until about a couple days ago when I sold it. And the church had bought me a Fuji. I'd recommended a Fuji X-T2 and a couple lenses, and they bought it. And so I've been using that, and I've been obsessed with it. I just like small mirrorless cameras.
Yeah. And I mean, that happened to me when I got the Fujifilm. I had the X-T2 for over a year. And when I got it, man, my Nikon just stayed in the bag almost all the time. It's just, I think you'll agree, it's just easier. It's just easier to get it and go out and shoot than deal with the big lenses and the big body, and especially if you do street, where I know you like to do a lot of street photography, having the big body and the big bulky zoom lens just doesn't make you blend in very well. So
and following Finn now that he's 2 and runs right, like, I don't know about Scarlett, but Finn does not sit still for a photo.
No.
At all.
No, hardly
Which
ever.
is annoying. So you see all these people on Instagram that have these amazing pictures of their kids. Their kids are not 2 years old. They're older than that.
Exactly.
You can tell them
That's
sit
right.
there for a second. Because even my nephews, my sister's boys, they're like 4 and 5. Well, then Holden's about 2 years old. But the other 4 and 5 year olds, they'll sit there and I can like pose them. You know, I'll be like, Eli, look over here. They're going to do all this stuff. And
that's right.
They're fine.
Yeah.
So the Fuji... The Nikon was harder to get a good photo because the focus was great for a DSLR, but not great in general. And so the Fuji, I can sit there with one hand and just fly through it. I got so many photos the first week that I had this Fuji testing it out that I was like, oh my gosh, I got way more photos than I normally would get with my Nikon. My Nikon's just so big.
Yeah.
It's like I don't want to take it outside when I'm chasing Finn around, and we're going on a walk or something. But the Fuji's just so small, and so
Well, and I think you'll agree with me as well that the best way to test an autofocus system is to chase around a 2-year-old.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, that is true. That is a great way to test it, actually. So,
yes. And so many big blogs are just like, saw this one guy that hung like an empty orange juice bottle on a string and just moved it back and forth. And I was like, man, you just need to get one of your nephews or nieces and just chase them around. It's just the best test.
All right, what about you?
All right, cool. So... with me, my name is Eric Marks. I already said that, but I started photography, I guess, 13, 14 years ago. And when I started, it was kind of a side gig, too. I was actually working at a church as a sound and lighting director, and I just took photos while I was there. I wasn't the paid photographer, but I really enjoyed it. And I think, rewinding back to my first camera, before we get to that point, kind of how I got into it was... my dad got this opportunity with his job to travel for a whole year, to just pack his whole family up and get on the road. So I was homeschooled at the time. So it was easy to my dad just took the whole family with us. We went all over, and that was probably the best year of my life. We drove everywhere. So we live in Georgia. We went all the way to Arizona and California and everywhere in between. And on that trip, my mom always had an interest in photography. So my dad bought her a Canon Rebel, of course, a film camera way back then. And I think he had bought her, I think they were Sigma lenses that he bought her. And it was a weird, 18 to 35 or zoom or something like that. And then a couple of primes. And on the first month of the trip, my mom hadn't even touched the camera. And I remember my dad went to a Wolf camera back in the day.
Yes, I loved
yeah,
Wolf camera.
yeah, and that's where we bought everything like brand new before the trip, because we were doing this big family road trip for a year, just packed up on the road, and my mom didn't touch the camera, so I don't know why I had this weird interest in it. I was like, hey, are you cool if I take some photos with it and just kind of play around with it? And she's like, yeah, you know what? Why don't he spent the money on this? Why don't you just like be the documenter of this trip? So that's kind of what got me interested. That I had this power to take these shots and to decide how I wanted them to look. And of course, back then I couldn't post-process them because it was film. I guess I could if I would have had a lab, but I was just a kid.
Do you still have those photos?
I have them somewhere. I don't know where they are, but I do have them somewhere. I have the rolls of film, and I have the ones that we got them developed at, I think it was called Eckerd Pharmacy a long time ago. Yeah. That's where we got them developed there, and I think maybe Walgreens or something. But yeah, I still have them. My coolest ones were because we went to the Grand Canyon, and pretty much anywhere you point a camera in the Grand Canyon,
every photo of the Grand Canyon looks awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna look great. So yeah, I'm sure I could get those for a future episode so we could show them. But yeah, that'd
be awesome.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I fell in love with just photography in general, or just being able to create something. And then after that, kind of fast forwarding through childhood, just playing around with cameras and stuff. My first real digital camera was a Nikon Coolpix something. I don't remember it was like a 2 megapixel. I got it for Christmas one year, and that thing I took with me everywhere. And I was the guy that literally like always had the camera. So like I remember me and my girlfriend, it was Haley, who was now my wife actually, back in high school. We would go play putt-putt with friends, and I would have the camera. I would just take random photos, and I do have all those photos still. I have no clue what I was thinking. I would take photos of like hole 9 and hole 10. I was just like trying to build this whole story that I never put. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm like, I'm gonna do like a MySpace slideshow. It never worked out. Yeah, so I have thousands of just meaningless photos, but it's good memories.
We'll have to do a whole show on like just old crappy photos we have.
That'd be a great show. So yeah, I everywhere. I mean, I remember we went to the grocery store and I just had the camera in the pocket and I just took pictures of everything. So yeah, then after that, I guess that was around, I was like 16, 17 years old. And then right around 18, 19, I got a Nikon D800. That was my first real like DSLR camera. And that was a 12 megapixel. People still use that one today. It was a crop sensor camera. And it had like actual manual controls. So I remember thinking like, man, that camera looks professional and sweet, and I can't wait to learn how to use it. And every photo I took was too dark or too bright. I had no clue how to use the manual settings. Didn't have the nice little like PASM dial for the manual and aperture priority. So that's where I had to really learn what exposure meant and how to use the light meter. My parents
that was a 12 megapixel.
12 megapixel, yeah.
That's pretty good, man. Because that's an older camera.
Yeah, I know. It was cutting edge back then, especially for the APS-C, because their full frame, like Nikon's full frame, the flagship back then, I think was the D3, and that was 12 megapixels too. It was full frame, but it was 12. So yeah, that was a really impressive camera for me to go out and use. And I think the lens that I had with it was a Tamron 28-75, 2.8, I think is what it was. So nice. It was a good little setup, and that's where I just took out all my friends and asked if I could take photos of them, and anyone that is boyfriend and girlfriend asked if I could take some couple photos. That was back when I actually liked shooting portraits. I'm not a huge fan of that now. Yeah. So I just did that for a while, and then eventually got more and more Nikon. That's where I kind of fell in love with Nikon. Like the Coolpix isn't really what sold me on Nikon, but the D800, when you start investing in lenses and stuff. So then I eventually got the D3, and then I got, I ended up getting a D90 actually after that for some reason. I don't really know why I got a D90. It was like a lower grade crop sensor as well.
Yeah, it is.
Then I got a full frame and started doing some wedding photography, real estate photography, and years in the future. I don't remember everything in between. But yeah, now up until a few weeks ago, I had an entire Fujifilm X-T2 kit and a Nikon kit, which was the D810. Then I recently picked up the D850, which I'm obsessed with. It's probably the best Nikon camera I've ever used. That's a bold statement, but it's got to be. It's fantastic. And then what none of my viewers on my website, on findingmiddleearth.com and my Finding Middle Earth YouTube channel, I haven't made a video yet that I've sold all of my Fuji stuff is gone. I'm trying to figure out how to structure that. Because this is probably
had all that too, man.
Yeah. So this is probably a whole episode for this, but like it's crazy how social media and like a following can almost kind of help direct and redirect what you buy sometimes. And I felt like I kept the Fujifilm stuff around a little too long because my viewers loved seeing videos about it. And which is, there's nothing wrong with that. Like I want to please my viewers, but I just like sometimes when I get away from the computer and the webcam and like all the lights go off and I'm not recording, I just like look in my office and I'm like, why do I have like a bag full of like 9 Fuji lenses and an X-T1 and X-T2 and an entire Nikon kit? Like, I don't need all that. Yeah. So it's really more of a business decision to just get rid of it, move on. I'll end up getting another mirrorless kit at some point. I'm very curious. Sure. Yeah, I'm very curious in the X-T3. I'm just as curious as you are with the value of the Sony A7 Mark III. The value for that camera.
I could not believe how cheap that, like, because the other day, actually yesterday, I was talking to a buddy of mine at work. He does our video at our church, and we were talking about the A7 III, and I was like, well, how much is it? I heard it was cheap, because I know Fuji's thinking about keeping the X-T3 a little bit cheaper because Sony's starting to creep in on their pricing. And I looked it up on B&H, and with the kit lens, it was like $2,200, and that's like nothing.
Yeah, and that's a full frame. It's a full frame mirrorless.
Full frame, awesome video, awesome pictures, incredible low light.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I started reading reviews because I hadn't read any reviews. I'd only watched Kai's video on it because anything Kai does, I'll watch. And so all the reviews, like online, just the little summaries at the top were like, best $2,000 camera ever, best all-around camera ever. And I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah, I kept seeing that too.
Yeah, because if I get like the X-T3 with a couple, like a lens or two, it's going to be like maybe $1,500, $1,600, $1,700. You're thinking just a couple $100 more and you've got a full frame camera.
Yeah. And even people that I had seen bash Sony before was like, okay, the $2,000 camera, full frame with all this, like, okay, I'll bow to Sony for a minute. That's a pretty good deal.
So the tricky thing, of course, which was my problem with the NEX5R, is that their lenses are so expensive.
Yeah.
Like the Sony branded lenses are all super, super expensive. There are some good Tamrons and Sigmas, which are fairly cheap. Like Tamron has a 28 to 70 2.8 coming out, or 25 to 70, whatever it is, for $799.
That's crazy.
And that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So it's like, but the Sony version is like $2,200. It's as much as the camera and the kit lens.
The G Master lens.
Yeah.
Those lenses. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say about Sony too, because I've people that are viewers of me on Finding Middle Earth know that I'm not like I'm not a huge fan of Sony. I don't talk great about their stuff, but all that stuff is like this the nitpicky little like usability stuff, like the menu system and the ergonomics. Like when it comes down to it, no matter what camera you get, we were talking about this yesterday, it's going to take a good photo if you know how to use the camera.
Yeah.
If you have an understanding of light and composition, you can take an iPhone and make a really good photo. And to go further on that too, which this is probably a whole nother episode, which is if you live near a beautiful location, you can go out with any camera at any time and point it at the beautiful location and take a really good, decent photo. So it's the whole Sony battle thing really isn't like, does it take good or bad pictures, or the pictures blurry or not? It's just the usability, the preference of the menu system and how it feels in your hands and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, because that was one of the reasons why I got away from the A6000 was because it just didn't feel like a camera. It just felt like a little piece of technology. Like it had no ergonomics at all. Like with the NEX5R, at least it was so small and thin that it just sort of blew you away. But the A6000 just didn't. If you hold any other camera, they all feel better than the A6000.
Right, and the A6000 has a little bit of a plasticky feel.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, it was a beast. I mean, there was like almost no better value for the money, except that once you got it in like 4 days, there was a new version of there's the A6300, the A6500, then whatever it is. They're pushing out more bodies than they are lenses at the time, and so it's like the more lenses you have, the cheaper they'll get over time. Yeah. And so, but it sounds like with A7 III, it's like they've officially like nailed it.
Right. Well, and that's what you'll love, and I'm sure you already know about Fujifilm, is that if they have a problem with the customer complaints, they'll fix it in a firmware update. You don't have to buy a version 2 of the camera. And I wish Nikon and Canon, all of them did that. That's the most fantastic part about Fujifilm, is that they listen to their customers. I remember I went to sleep one night, I woke up one morning, and I saw on the rumors site that we had a new firmware update. And I was like, oh, I wonder if it's just like some bug fixes. And it was like a whole list. It was like, hey, Merry Christmas, here you go. Your camera now has like 4K video on the X Pro 2, and you have like 200 more focus points. And the fact that they can actually add features and not just do bug fixes is just incredible.
That's so crazy.
It is.
And their lenses are moderately priced too.
Yes, I agree. And for the quality, I mean, they're very quality lenses.
Yeah, they are. Because I would really, for the most part, really all I need, I just like a 50 millimeter. And so like the 35 f2 is pretty much 50 millimeter.
Yeah.
And that was, although I will say on the D800, my favorite lens probably was the 24-120 f4.
Yeah.
That
very
was a killer lens.
Yep.
I mean, that's because even on a full frame, f4 is a really good depth of field, especially when you're shooting at 120.
Yep.
And I just love that range and that aperture. So that was
and you're not, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not like a big fan of taking a bunch of gear and switching lenses all the time, right? You prefer something that's just super versatile that you can just take, point and shoot, zoom in, zoom out.
Yeah, because I usually don't end up buying a lot of lenses because I'm more of a hobbyist photographer, although I'd like it to be a full-time job at some point, but right now I mainly just do it for fun. I do some for pay. I've got a family coming up in a couple weeks. I just did a maternity shoot like a month ago or something, so I do like 3 or 4 jobs a year, but it's mainly friends and family that are like, hey, can you take my pictures? I'm like, sure. And you're more of you actually are a professional photographer. You sell prints and you do stuff like that. So for me, it's like
the most unstable job in the US of A.
Yeah, I know. Seriously.
Yes.
So and that's one of the reasons why, because I take a lot of photos at my job, so I kind of like that. But if I could make you like photography, like if we could do something together eventually in the future, takes a while to get there, then that would be awesome. But until then, I can't buy like 4 or 5 or 6 lenses, because I can't just justify the price of it yet. So that's why I'm looking for Fuji, because they have all their sort of basic lenses are right around $399.
Right.
For the most part, which is pretty awesome.
And honestly, that's why, to rewind like 10 seconds about you being a hobbyist, that's why I think this podcast is going to be so interesting. And what got me so excited about it is because if we were both professional photographers in the industry, like I feel like even myself can get just snobby sometimes. Like photographers are just snobs. They're whiny babies. And so the fact that you're more of like, you have like another job that pays your bills and does that, and you can just look at photography as a hobby and just something just strictly for fun, you have probably sometimes way better opinions than I do, and you can step back and look at things just a little more fair because you're not so like just poured over it. Like it doesn't control you financially sometimes. So you're a very good element to this podcast, because I can tend to just jump down certain camera brands' throats sometimes, and you'll pull me back when I do that, I'm sure. So because I've been known to do that about Sony.
Oh man, because when I was debating between a Nikon and Fuji last Christmas, I could not decide between the two.
Yeah.
I should have gone with my heart, which was Fuji, because I'm more of a hipster, kind of. Less of a hipster, no more of a hipster dad now, which is a lot worse, a lot nerdier, because it doesn't have the cool stuff. I don't dress cool or anything, but I do like the more kind of feel of the Fuji, and I should have just gone with my heart. I should have just done that. But I did like the Nikon. But remember at first when I got the Nikon, my dad had these old D lenses, the ones that like the angry photographer says are like sharp, the sharpest thing in the world. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever, let's give this a shot. And I had a 51.8 D, and I put it on there, and I was zooming into the pictures. And with 36 megapixels, if it's a bad lens, it's going to show up.
Yes.
Because you have a lot of pixels to show how bad it is.
Absolutely.
So I zoomed in on some pictures from Christmas of family, and I'm like, man, this is not nearly as sharp as my Sigma from my A6000. I had Sigma 31.4, which is one of my favorite lenses, and I'm like, that was way sharper than this stupid little D800. And I'm like, this, and you remember me texting, I'm like, this camera is not that good, man.
I was like, dude, get a good lens.
You're like, get a G lens. I'm like, all right, fine. So I saved up and I got the 24-120 G, and right before we went on a church retreat, I brought it there, and I was like, holy crap, this is much better. This
Yeah.
is an actual. That's when I realized that was really the time when I realized lenses really make a big difference.
Oh man, it's all about the glass. I mean, and the 24 to 120 was just testing the water. Like if you, like you see, I think you used my 70 to 200 one time, and then of course the 24 to 70 and the primes, even the 51.8 is razor sharp and a really good solid lens for the money.
Oh yeah.
So. All right, so we got the intros over with. You want to hop into this hot topic of the Nikon full-frame mirrorless that's coming out?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so so far, I'll be honest, I should know a lot more, but I've been kind of purposely disconnecting myself a little bit from it because it's just hitting so hard right now on social media. I typically don't like just throwing my videos because I have a YouTube channel for anyone listening that doesn't know, and I watch a lot of other photography YouTube channels, and if I just go to my subscription list, every single video is the Nikon Z mirrorless, and I just don't want to play into that because what's the point? I'll get like 20,000 views and five AdSense dollars, but why it's just unless it's like in stone right now. I'm not a big fan of getting in on the rumors, but we do have some leaked images. It definitely looks interesting. It looks like they're definitely going back to like the old, like the Nikon F series film cameras, or the very early digital, whatever they were. What do you think so far about like the design, the form factor that you've seen? What do you think?
It pretty much looks like if you could take a DSLR and say, what would this actually look like if you didn't change much but made it a mirrorless? It pretty much looks just like that.
That's right.
I mean, it looks just like a Nikon.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, I guess that's good because they're probably going to mainly make this for like their base, for the most part. Because I don't think many of the Sony fanboys are really going to jump over. But I mean, until we really see it in like with people holding it and really kind of getting to see it with light on it. It looks okay. You know, I'm just, as we were talking before, it doesn't look like it has a ton of dials that we can at least see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's going to be the deal breaker for, I probably won't get it, but
yeah.
I think for a lot of people, if you're going full frame, you're thinking high hobbyist pros, prosumers, they like to have their dials, which is one reason why I love the Fuji. So, I mean, it looks good, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I noticed there was some new leaked images this morning, and it looked like they actually had a lot of dials on the back of the camera.
Oh, okay.
And they have like the tiny little display on top, like the XH1. I was just looking at it on Nikon Rumors, or you can just Google image it too. And I noticed that I think it dropped last night or this morning or sometime in the middle of the night. They did it. I'm sure Nikon did it as another tease or something.
Oh yeah.
Because these people are just jumping on that at every chance. It looks. The ergonomics don't look as bad as I was assuming. On the back of the camera, it looks like it has a little nub for your thumb, which is nice in case your hands are a little bigger like mine and can't fit into the smaller grips. I see that they're comparing it to a Sony full frame camera, like the size, like the A7R 3. It looks like it's a little chunkier than that, which I will like that.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So, anyway, that just to not hang on that too long, but it looks like it has a sufficient number of buttons on the back. I don't know still. It looks like the top just has your PASM dial on the left and some kind of dial on the right, maybe exposure comp or something.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah. It's looking it's interesting. We'll say that. Like you said, we're cautiously optimistic about it. I'm hoping it's going to be a big win for Nikon. They can't really afford to make it a flop right now. As far as features and stuff, we're hearing that they're going to have a 24 megapixel version and a 46 megapixel version. That would be amazing if that were true.
So pretty much an A7 III and an A7R.
That's right. Yeah, and the form factor does look pretty darn similar to a Sony A7R III.
It does. It does.
But I'm sure they've been watching the industry, and a lot of people do like the Sony ergonomics. So I mean, they have to learn from somebody.
The full frames aren't that bad.
Yeah. So
you had a Sony, didn't you have an A7R too?
I had the A7R II, right? And I had the A7 II. That's when I tried out Sony as my mirrorless kit.
That's right.
Yeah, and I did that for. I think I lasted as a Sony user for 2 or 3 months, maybe.
Yeah, it wasn't that long because you tried doing like was it night photography or something like that? And
it
just
was
crapped out on you.
Yeah, it was. Well, so I tried an event. I tried a wedding with it. It didn't work out great because it was just the I don't know, it felt like the menu, like every time I was like, oh, I need to change this function, I had to dive through like 10 menu pages to find it. And it was something like to turn on high-speed sync for certain flashes, and that was like another menu dive. There's just nothing. I feel like there was nothing fast about it for an event setting. I'm sure they've improved on that. And then I don't know if this was my body, but I remember the biggest issue I was telling you about was with the long exposure noise reduction turned off, so there was no post noise reduction. Yeah, every time I would do a long exposure more than like 20 seconds, it would just say processing, and it would take so long to show me the preview on the back of the camera. It just felt like I was waiting on like a 6-year-old computer to load, not a camera. It just felt very
like you're processing a photo in Aurora.
That's right. Like I was processing a photo in the early versions of Aurora HDR. It was like like 6 hours to spit out
something
one?
Like that.
And now it's like 4.5 hours.
Yeah,
so
it's
yeah,
better.
So you can watch, like, instead of watching the entire Lord of the Rings series, you can just watch one Lord of the Rings movie and come back, and Aurora will spit out your photo. Anyway, so the Sony just didn't work out for me at the time. I'm sure if I tried it again, I'd feel different, because I've seen even some of the photographers that I follow that have been Nikon D810 users, D800 users, are still, they're selling everything and going A7R. I mean, it's a fantastic camera system. If you can afford the G Master lenses, they're fantastic. There's no question about that. It's a great system. But the biggest question right now is, do you think the Nikon full frame mirrorless will compete with the Sony, or do you think it's going to come to the point where it's like Nikon users, as old as time, are going to just stick with it, and they're not really trying to steal people from the Sony world? I mean, it's going to be hard to compete with that $1999 price tag on the Sony A7 III.
Yeah, that's a big thing. If it's like even maybe 2500 without a kit lens, and that's good, but that's still not going to beat Sony 2200 with a kit lens.
Right.
And you're starting over with all new lenses on this Z mount. So it's like, I mean, it probably wouldn't take them too long to match Sony in lenses, because Sony's not super fast with lenses, and I bet Nikon could probably push out lenses faster than Sony could.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, I don't know, that A7 III, I mean, that's just rocking the world right now.
It is.
And so I think they'll get a bunch of Nikon loyalists that Sony won't be able to get, so they'll pull a lot of those people over, and there's a lot of them. But I don't know. They have to have something with the camera that Sony doesn't have. There has to be some sort of like catch or something that Sony people go, whoa, I want that.
That's right.
Because right now, Sony A7 III and even the A7R II with the high megapixel, they have everything.
Yeah.
They have incredible video. They have incredible low light. I mean, it looks like finally the Sony A7 III is like really competing with the D750 for low light.
Yeah.
Because this D750 was like the king of low light.
Yeah.
So
that and the DF, or I guess from
the
Nikon.
DF. Yeah. So they have to have something, but I mean, I don't know. I just don't know.
I know. So I guess best case scenario, if they're really trying to mimic this whole like, middle of the road megapixel and a high megapixel version, best case scenario, they'll match it and do the Z6, I guess is what people are calling it, the Nikon Z6 at like $19.99, and then the Z7, the high megapixel at like $32.99, kind of like the Sony.
Yeah.
They'll just match the price. I guess that would be hopeful. The best case scenario is that they'll somehow beat it in price, and
That'd be insane.
That would be insane. I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be absolutely insane. They'll somehow beat it in price and make people really start looking at the system.
Or if it comes with a really good kit lens.
Yes.
Because like Fuji's kit lens is a 2.8 to 4.
Right.
Which is awesome.
And it's one of the best quality kit lenses, image quality kit lenses I've ever used. I mean,
that thing used is like $450.
Yeah, it's almost insulting calling it a kit lens because it's so good.
Yeah. That's what I used when I went to the Braves game this past week, and I had the 35 f2 and the kit lens at 2.8 to 4, and I think I kept the 2.8 to 4 on there most of the time.
Yeah. I made a video about that on my YouTube channel where I took this whole bag of Fuji lenses to Disney World, where I thought I was going to like have this lens for the parade and this lens for nighttime. I just kept the 18 to 55 on there the entire vacation. That was my lens. It's basically like a 24 to 70, and the aperture range is not bad at all, especially for acceptable light, and it's fantastic. It's easily good enough to. I mean, it's more than good enough for social media and posting. And I've done some prints from that lens that have been quite pleasing as well. So, but going back,
great if it came with a good kit lens.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So the biggest question is, other than pricing the bodies, hopefully they'll also moderately price, or at least acceptably price their lenses to what we already are familiar with the Nikon lenses. Hopefully they're not going to try to go the G Master route, and for just a regular prime you'll be paying like $2,000 for a 50 millimeter prime or something, which might be the case, because we've heard that they're working on like an f1 prime lens or something, or like an f0.95. So,
that's insane.
Yeah.
So explain to me, because I've been reading about this, and I think I asked about it earlier. It said that this new mount is going to be able to shoot under f1.
Yeah, so what it seems like is they're saying that because of the flange distance, and again, we haven't seen the camera, I don't know if this is true, but the flange distance is basically the distance between the sensor and the lens. When like the back of the lens when it's screwed on to the camera when it's
does that mean they'll be closer or they'll be further away?
That's what I don't know, because I'm not the techiest guy when it comes to the like intricate stuff of cameras. I just know what the flange distance is, so I don't know if that means that maybe they'll have to move it closer or further away to achieve that. I'm assuming probably closer, especially since the mount on this Z camera looks so huge. If you've noticed that, it looks like
huge. It's like the whole front side is like the diameter of
when I first saw their teaser video, before I really looked at the sensor, my Fuji GFX dreams just got the best of me, and I was like, oh my gosh, the Z camera is going to be medium format, because I just saw the lens mount and it looked like a medium format lens mount. So that would be quite hilarious if Nikon does release the Z and it's like, oh guys, it's not full frame, it actually is medium format, by the way. I would be so happy.
And $1,900.
And $1,900. My God, I'd sell everything. Awesome. I would sell everything and buy that.
So it sounds like maybe because in one of their teaser videos, they were talking about how they made this new mount specifically for mirrorless cameras.
Right.
So that had me a little interested when they said that, because if they really added something that's different than all the other mirrorless lens mounts, I don't know what it is, but I was reading something where they said a 1.8 lens could really act like a 1.4, and I didn't understand what they meant by that. But I don't know if it meant like letting in light or something like that, but that sounded pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, they probably just added a mirror in the lens.
Yeah, probably. It's really just just a D850.
That's right. We took it out of the camera and we had to put it somewhere, so we put it in the lenses.
That would be hilarious.
Yeah. So I guess it'll all. I mean, we could speculate all day about it, but I guess it just comes down to when they release it. I'm just curious about price. Then we'll know more. We can talk more about how we think it's going to compete in the industry. Right now, it's just a bunch of hopes and dreams and some cool teaser videos.
Well, and it sounds like it's coming with an adapter.
Yeah. So at least from what I've heard from different places, it's going to come with a Z mount to F mount adapter for free, is what I've heard, which would be killer. I mean, that's nice that they would do that for free. Because when you invest in the Sony system, there's a million other third-party adapters out there. There's some that are $15, and there's smart adapters that are $400 or $500. Like the MetaBones adapter and stuff.
Yeah, they're real expensive.
Yeah, but I remember, so when Canon came out with their first mirrorless, the EOS M, that came with an adapter for free, I believe, in the kit, and that would adapt your mirrorless to your Canon L lenses, or I forget the EF mount, I think they call it. Speaking of that, I wonder why Canon has. I'm sure Canon's just sitting back right now, waiting to see what Nikon is doing. I'm assuming. I mean, I have to assume they've already made their mirrorless camera, and they're probably just waiting to see how they're marketing it. Because the rumor is that both Nikon and Canon are going to be releasing these full frame mirrorless very soon. But Canon, we've heard nothing from Canon.
Canon's probably still wondering if they should put 4K in it.
That's
probably checking to see if people actually use 4K yet.
That's very true. We're still waiting on the R&D reports.
It's bad when you take longer to adopt something than Apple, because Apple's always a little bit slower to adopt certain technologies on their phones.
Yes.
And Canon is just like, I don't know. I mean, 1080p is still pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm sure Canon will be. The reports have come in. We'll do 2K. Yeah, so that
makes sense.
Yeah, gosh.
So they're going to have, because I remember reading some post, it was an older post, I think, So they're going to have a new mirrorless that's the same as like this 24-42. Are they going to be doing that too, or are they just coming out with a new?
That I don't know. I'm sure there's rumors about that somewhere. I'm sure there's a Canon rumors website, but because there's an everything rumors website. I can't say that I've been there, but I don't know. But I that would be quite cool and quite strange if everyone just kind of copies the Sony like middle of the road and then a super high megapixel. It would be nice. Canon already kind of I think Canon was the first. No, okay, not the very first, but they were the first to push the envelope with a 50 megapixel. This was years ago. They had their like 20 megapixel 7D or 70D, 80D line, and they did the Canon 5DS and the 5DSR, and that was a 50 megapixel full frame. And I remember people went crazy about that. Yeah. The problem was it had really sucky dynamic range, and so for landscape shooters that wanted,
so that's pointless.
Yeah, so the landscape shooters that wanted the full frame, high resolution, it's like, man, it's with bad dynamic range, that's everything in landscape photography. So. Yeah, I wasn't too interested in that, but I wonder if they're gonna go off of that, and maybe Nikon's gonna do a 46, and they're gonna do like an 80 megapixel or something, because it notoriously in the past that would be insane. Notoriously in the past, Canon has always done just a few more megapixels than Nikon. Like Nikon had the 12 megapixel, and Canon had like a 16, and then Nikon did like a 16, and then Canon had like the 18 or the 20. So they've always been a little bit ahead until Nikon did the D800, the 36. But then Canon answered that with a 50. So these megapixel wars are never going to end. So we'll just see what Canon does to answer that.
What if they released a mirrorless version of their T3i?
Oh, then I would sell
it's
everything.
It's called like the Z3i.
The Rebel Z.
I think you can still buy a T3i at Costco for $800.
Oh, yes, of course you can.
2 kit lenses.
And I still, oh gosh, I just want to throw up every single time I go into a Best Buy. Like literally, I will be in the camera section, like getting something, a battery or an SD card or something, and I will hear every time a Best Buy representative tell some nice little family that walks in, like, "Hey, I'm getting my first camera. Oh, Canon Rebel. That's the only way to go.
Rebel.
Get that Canon Rebel." And it's like, man, what do these employees get for selling Canon Rebels? They must get like a car, because that's the only camera that they recommend.
I was thinking about this the other day. I picture Canon as like CBS, where their shows aren't really, you don't look at their shows and go, wow, that's a good show, I have to watch it. But they go on for 50 seasons for every single show.
That's right.
You know, like if you actually sit down and watch NCIS, you're like, this is really not that great of a show.
Yeah.
But there's like 38 seasons of it, and it has a huge following. You don't really know why, but then sometimes if you really get into it, then you're hooked.
Yeah.
And so that's how I picture Canon, is like, they don't really have any cameras that you're like, oh my gosh, everyone's talking about this camera, you know? Mm-hmm. None of them. Like, I don't hear anyone talking about anything
right.
that Canon does that gets any talk, like the A7 III or XT2 or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they're pretty solid cameras.
Yeah, I mean, I owned a Canon. I guess I skipped over this in the intro, but there was a point where
you shot Canon.
That's right.
Mark III.
Yeah, when I got into weddings full time, and I started by second shooting for people, and then I eventually did my own thing. Everyone used Canon stuff, and every time I was like, man, every time I would second shoot,
everyone does.
Everybody in the wedding field, and everybody that I would be a second shooter for, this guy kind of learning the industry, they would go, hey, I have 3 Canon flashes over there and this Canon thing over there. Do you have a Canon camera? And I'm like, I got the Nikon D3, which was good, but it's like every time they want me to sync up with their lights, or like, hey, here's a lens of mine if you don't want to use your kit lens or whatever, here's like a 24-70, I would have a Nikon mount. So I kind of had to invest in the Canon for the weddings, and the 5D Mark III was really solid for that. It had fast autofocus, faster than the Nikon equivalent at the time, really good low light autofocus, which was imperative for weddings. Yeah, great video. They've always had great video. My gosh, I remember the whole Canon 5D Mark II hype, where like 4 episodes of House and every commercial on TV was filmed with the 5D Mark II. Yeah, so yeah, Canon has a very solid camera line. They're just, like you say, there's nothing earth-shattering or exciting about it, at least to me. But there's something, it's probably, I guarantee you the Canon Rebel line is like just continuously what financially supports Canon. Like that's how, like, their Rebels just support everything. So yeah, anyway, that's enough about Canon. But yeah, I think that that it's going to be interesting to see how they answer the Sony mirrorless and the Nikon mirrorless. And then this also begs another question, I would say, before we wrap it up, is when Nikon does this mirrorless release, is Sony then going to finally release their Sony A7S III? That's the only one they haven't updated yet. And then all of a sudden it's going to blow everything out of the water. It's going to finally have the insane low light with a really good megapixel count.
Yeah, because that'll be interesting, because right now that's always been the video.
Yes, that's right.
Because that's the one that Kai, I think, uses. Mm-hmm. And I know every Sony event he's been to has asked reps if the A7S III is coming out.
Yeah, every time.
Every single person. He's like, is it coming out? So, yeah, but, because, I mean, nobody really buys the A7S for photography, do they?
People were buying it for wedding photography because of its insane low light. And they don't need high megapixels. So they could shoot at like ISO 25,000 and get a good image.
Insane.
Yeah. And because,
what megapixel count is it now?
Is a 12. I think it's still a 12.
I thought it was a 12.
Yeah,
wow.
still. Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, so which is acceptable, for wedding stuff. I mean, it's acceptable for sure. But yeah, it would be crazy if they bumped it to like a 24 and kept the same low light capability. That would be just unmatched, because it's still you can't match it in low light capability. It's unbelievable. I remember I got my hands on the very first A7S. And even that, you could go into like a pitch black room with just like some ambient light from like the outside night sky or like the moon, and you could see everything in the room. You could see more than my eyes could see. It was nuts.
So when is the Nikon? It's being announced this week, isn't it?
I think so. They said soon on their video. They were like, coming soon. So
I was reading it was the 23rd or something like that, or
23rd.
Maybe that's their next teaser video or something. Who knows?
Yeah,
I think they have one more teaser video.
Yeah, probably.
I think the last one I thought was pretty. It was kind of annoying. All these random little influencers, who nobody knew who they were.
Exactly.
And they're like, oh, it's great. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't really care what you think. If they had Kai or like the camera store guys.
Get some social influencers.
Anyone, the angry photographer, that would be hilarious.
Yeah. Me?
He was like,
no, I'm just kidding.
You? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if they just send it to random people who don't do photography.
Yeah, that'd be great. But the whole time I was thinking, okay, I could at least stand to watch this if this was the voice of Sir Johnny Ive. Because then at least it would
if it was Johnny Ive,
yeah.
They would sell out, man.
Yeah, exactly.
He would just be like, we started with one camera.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we cut it in half.
And we merged it with a Canon camera.
Of course, he has made a camera. Did you know that?
Yeah, you told me about that. What is it called again?
He designed a Leica.
A Leica, that's right. Yeah,
it sold for like $800,000.
Of course it did. And of course he made a Leica. Why wouldn't he?
And it was like solid aluminum, It was like
you mean aluminium?
Aluminium.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I was like, gosh, I want that so bad, man.
Yeah.
But I think there was only like one made, so.
Oh, gosh. Well, no wonder.
Of course.
Yeah, so, at least they could have gotten him for that. But that's a different story. I am going to be interested to see how Sony answers to the Nikon release, too. Because, they can crack out cameras every 5 minutes, literally, when they want to. So they'll just be like, oh, okay, well, here's the A7 III and the A7 IV right there. Go ahead.
Could be. So, of course. I'm sure they already have it.
Yeah. They already have the next 5 generations ready to go. They're just waiting. Sometimes they probably even have like the 3, 4, and 5 made. Okay, let's skip 3, 4, 5. Let's go for the 6. Let's just kill everybody.
Let's do it.
Yeah. That will be interesting though. And who knows when they're gonna? I don't even know. I'm trying to remember how long the A9. The A9 has been out. It seems like the A9 lost a lot of hype when the A7 III came out, because that's like a $4,500 body versus the $2,000 body.
And it still has 10 frames per second on the A7 III, which is half of what the A9 can do.
Yeah,
so that's pretty awesome.
Definitely. So it'll still be interesting just to see, because they have this just wielding power of technology that they can put in cameras very quickly, and sometimes they do it. A lot of times they'll push it out into cameras that aren't really ready to hit the market yet. It's still very cool to see them push the envelope. So that's probably what I'm most curious about. After the Nikon release is how Sony's going to answer to that, because they own the market right now. I saw stats the other day that they're number 1 in full frame sales right now. That's nuts. The Sony,
like total full frame sales or mirrorless?
I don't. That's a good question. I think it was total. Could be just mirrorless, because they're not the only ones with full frame mirrorless right now, are they? I'm trying to think. Well, now
because Fuji skipped over full frame and went to medium format.
They went straight to medium format. We'll see Panasonic is Micro Four Thirds.
Pentax doesn't.
I guess they are. So I guess it's probably just the full frame market in general, because that would be silly to just say we own full frame sales in mirrorless because we are the only ones.
Because nobody else competes with us.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that'll be interesting to see how they answer to that. It'll be cool. Any closing thoughts, Mr. Joseph?
I don't think so. It'll be interesting to see what Nikon does.
Yeah, we might have to. So if it's what's the, I don't even know what is today's date. It's the 21st? Second. Okay, so it might be released tomorrow then.
It could be, I think.
Jeez.
I don't know where I was reading that. I'm sure I was reading it somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
well, we might have
that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, we might have to rendezvous again tomorrow morning for another early podcast if they do something big.
We'll definitely have to do that.
Yeah. Next week, I don't know. I guess next week's probably the next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll probably talk about this Nikon stuff, and then hopefully we'll have a Sony A7S III and maybe something from Canon to talk about. So,
because I'll still be debating. I mean, it'll be a while before I get my next camera, but I'm still gonna be pouring over Fuji A7 III.
Yeah.
Fuji
Well, and then
A7
you might even be right. You might even be back to Nikon if this mirrorless is really good.
I know. That's what I was thinking earlier. I was like, what if it comes full circle and this Nikon comes out? And then I buy that, and then I go and I buy my old lenses again.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, hey, that'd be
not bad.
Be pretty crazy if their F lenses work pretty well on this new mount with the adapter. Then I don't know.
Yeah,
it'd be pretty tempting.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know until we actually see it. So
that's right.
I'm hoping I'm gonna try to. For those that are going to watch our YouTube channel versus our podcast, which we'll give that information when we get all that set up. I'm going to try to get one in to review soon after they come out. I have a couple of camera stores that I'm talking to that might can send me one, so I'm going to try to get one in.
Nice.
Yeah. So we'll see
we'll have to get together for
you will have to
a video for that.
Definitely, we'll have to do a joint podcast for that for sure because we got to both get our hands on it and
we should go to. We should take it and then go to the quarry from Stranger Things.
Oh man, we've been wanting to do that for a long time.
We have a whole slew of places that we can go where they've filmed because they film every single movie is now required to be filmed in Georgia.
That's right. Yeah. So oh my gosh,
because we went to the Hunger Games ruins that one time.
That's right.
So we should definitely do something like that. If you get the Nikon, we should go somewhere and I'll film you and then you'll film me. And
yep. For sure.
We'll play around with it.
Yeah, because we gotta have an actual opinion on it after we shoot with it. That's I can't stand talking about a camera that I've never used. It's very annoying.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching today's episode of Burst Mode, and we will see you guys next week for another podcast, unless Nikon actually releases the Z system tomorrow, in which case we'll probably be back tomorrow morning. Take care, everyone.